Hi, I'm Daisy. 6 months ago, I let my sister and her family stay in my home, just until they got back on their feet. But somewhere between the laundry loads, the name on the electric bill changing, and strangers thinking she owned my house, I disappeared. Quietly, slowly. And when I finally asked for a little respect, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you don't like it, leave." So I did. I walked out with nothing but my laptop and a folder of proof. The next morning, I woke up to 40 missed calls. But why did it take silence for them to finally listen? What else had they stolen behind my back? And what would have happened if I hadn't left? I didn't say anything that night, but I started locking my bedroom door again. It was a Thursday in early April when Shauna showed up with her whole circus of a family. I'd taken the morning off to make space in the guest room. The smaller one, mind you. But when the truck backed into my driveway, I saw them unloading more than just weekend bags. Suitcases, storage bins, a huge box labeled game room. That wasn't temporary. That was the start of something permanent, and I knew it before a single box hit my hardwood floors. "I hope this isn't too much," Shauna said, setting down a tote full of folded baby blankets. Her kids were 12 and 9. I forced a smile. "It's fine. Just glad I could help." She didn't hear the emphasis I placed on could. Malcolm gave me a casual nod, one of those gestures people make when they're grateful but don't want to say it out loud. Ivy and Cullen stormed past me into the hallway like they'd done it 100 times before. No pause, no permission. By 6 p.m. that night, my house didn't smell like me anymore. It smelled like store-bought meatloaf and scented dryer sheets. Shauna had done laundry. She hadn't asked. By Friday morning, she had already claimed the bigger guest room, the one I'd cleared when Mom had her knee replacement surgery last year. I didn't say anything. Maybe she needed the extra space. That was what I told myself. But the sting didn't go away. Later that afternoon, I came back from picking up a few things at the market, and Malcolm was sprawled on my couch, shoes off, his socks curled at the toes, like he'd just clocked out of his own home. The TV was on, football rerun playing, volume louder than it should have been for 3 p.m. "You mind if I use the downstairs office for calls tomorrow?" he asked, not looking up from the screen. "That's my workroom," I replied. He looked confused, like the idea of me needing my own space hadn't occurred to him. "I'll be quick, it's just Zoom stuff." I didn't argue. I nodded and walked upstairs. That night, I stepped into the kitchen to make tea and froze. The mugs were all in the wrong cabinet. My spice rack, alphabetized, was rearranged. The chalkboard I used to plan meals had a doodle of a dinosaur with "Ivy was here" scribbled in pink. My jaw tightened. Shauna came in behind me, humming. She noticed me staring and chirped. "I moved the dishes around a bit. This way's more efficient, don't you think?" Efficient for who? I bit the inside of my cheek and grabbed a glass from the lowest shelf. The one I never used because it had a hairline crack. My thumb traced it as I filled it with water. She was still humming when she left the room. That bothered me more than anything else. I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at my fridge. The magnets had been shifted. My grocery list was gone. A drawing of Cullen and a dinosaur had replaced it. I stood there for a long time. You ever get the feeling you're shrinking inside a space you built yourself? That night, after they'd all gone to bed, I opened the hallway closet and pulled out the old family photo Mom had insisted we take one Christmas. I hadn't hung it in years, but I kept it tucked away behind my linens. I held it in both hands, let my fingers rest just below my own face. My smile looked forced. Shauna's didn't. I slid the frame back behind the towels and returned to my room. I locked the door and sat on the bed, shoes still on. The lamp cast long shadows across the floor. I hadn't planned on feeling like a stranger in my own house. But then I heard her voice, light, casual, from the hallway as she tucked Ivy into bed. "Make yourself at home, sweetie. This is our space now." She didn't mean for me to hear it. That's what made it worse. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm into the room and demand boundaries. I just sat there, hands clasped tight, the taste of metal sitting heavy on my tongue. and for the first time since they moved in, I realized this wasn't going to be temporary. I didn't say anything that night, but I started locking my bedroom door again. By the next afternoon, I'd stopped leaving it open at all. It was a Saturday, the kind of afternoon that makes you believe your house should feel like home. Quiet, safe, predictable. I'd just come back from picking up groceries. I had a bag in each hand, car keys clenched between my teeth, trying not to drop the eggs. My porch looked like a party supply store exploded on it. Streamers, shoes, wrappers, wrapping paper. Inside, it smelled like chocolate cake and something artificially fruity. Music pulsed from the living room, some upbeat pop I didn't recognize. The volume was high enough that the floorboards hummed. Kids' laughter echoed from the hallway. No one had said anything about a party. I pushed open the door with my shoulder and paused. Ivy was wearing a tiara and holding a balloon the size of her own head. "Hi, Auntie Daisy," she shouted, running past me barefoot. "Hey, birthday girl," I said automatically, still standing half in and half out the door. I stepped inside. On the console table, where I usually dropped my keys, there were goodie bags lined up in neat little rows. My name wasn't on any of them. In the dining room, my best glassware was on display. The set I kept boxed unless company I invited was coming. Shauna was setting out napkins, dressed like she was hosting a bridal shower. She didn't notice me at first. One of the other moms, someone I'd never met, smiled at me and said, "Oh, you must be the nanny. Ivy looks just like her real mom." I smiled back and said nothing. Just turned toward the kitchen. The fridge had magnets I didn't recognize. A drawing of a cat hung on it. My list of bills was gone. The top cabinet doors were already ajar, and my name-labeled meal prep containers had been moved. Again. "Could you grab the extra napkins from the pantry?" Shauna called over her shoulder. "Be a dear." I stood still for a second. The woman next to her raised an eyebrow, like she wasn't sure what she just witnessed. Malcolm was sitting at the edge of the couch, pretending to scroll on his phone. He hadn't even looked up. I walked to the pantry, opened the door, took out a stack of cheap, colorful napkins, and placed them on the counter. Shauna gave me a nod like I'd just done my job. I didn't eat any of the cake. I didn't stay long in the living room. When I escaped to my bedroom a few hours later, the hallway was littered with half-deflated balloons and pieces of ribbon that stuck to my socks. I locked the door behind me and sat at the foot of the bed. The blinds were still drawn from earlier. The room was dim. I didn't cry. I just sat. Later that evening, I opened my bank app. It's a habit I have. Something about tracking little charges keeps me feeling like things are under control. There was a $487 charge from a party supply site, one I'd used once before, 2 years ago. But this time, I hadn't placed the order. I clicked the receipt. Foil balloons, custom cake toppers, tablecloths, all shipped to my address. I walked downstairs, quietly. Shauna was rinsing dishes. I placed my phone on the counter between us and said, "Did you use my card?" She didn't even look up. "Oh yeah, I thought it was the one we always used. You know, the shared one. We don't have a shared card." She finally glanced at me, mildly annoyed. "Okay, well, sorry. I figured you wouldn't mind. You always say stuff like, 'Don't worry about it.'" "That was when you needed groceries," I said, voice flat. "Not party decor." She shrugged. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. It's for Ivy." I nodded once, walked away again. I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw anything. Instead, I went back to my room, opened my laptop, and pulled up my house deed. Then, my last 3 months of utility bills. I downloaded them all, PDF format, created a folder titled Proof. I didn't feel angry in the traditional sense. I wasn't boiling over, I was something else. Focused. People like Shauna count on silence. They rely on your guilt, your upbringing, your be the bigger person wiring. And I had been. For so long. But people forget. Eventually, even silence has an expiration date. That night, I labeled a second folder. Legal prep. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. but I knew exactly why I was going to need it. By the time Sunday rolled around, the folder I'd created the night before was sitting quietly on my desktop. I didn't touch it again that morning. I needed space from it, and from everything it represented. But space wasn't something I had much of anymore. Malcolm had commandeered the living room with his laptop and headset, yelling into some Zoom call while Cullen played a racing game on full volume next to him. Ivy was painting rocks at the kitchen table, using my white dinner plates as her palette. And Shauna was on the phone with someone, laughing loudly in the hallway like it was her own home. Not a guest space, not just for a few weeks, but hers. I made coffee, I took it upstairs, and I waited until dinner. That night, I printed out the utility bills, 3 months' worth. They weren't color-coded or fancy, just line items and totals. One had doubled, one had tripled. Another looked like it was from a whole other household. After dinner, while everyone was in the den watching some talent show, I laid the papers out on the dining table. I didn't clear the table first. I wanted them to see. I wanted the mess around the evidence to speak for itself. When Shauna walked in and saw the stack, her eyes narrowed. "Are we behind on something?" she asked, feigning casual. I took a breath. "No. But we need to talk." She didn't sit. Malcolm hovered in the doorway. "I've covered everything since March," I said. "That's rent, electricity, water, groceries, internet." Shauna gave a tiny laugh, sharp and dry. So, these aren't small numbers anymore. I work from home. I pay my own mortgage. I can't carry 6 people. "We're not 6, she snapped. "We're 4. I held her gaze. "Plus you, plus Malcolm, plus 2 kids. She crossed her arms. "You knew what you were offering when you let us in. Now you're keeping score?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm keeping records." Malcolm muttered, "Wow," and walked out. Shauna's tone hardened. "We're family, or at least we used to be. You're really going to start treating us like tenants?" "I didn't treat you like anything," I said. "I didn't set boundaries. That's on me." She clapped her hands together once. "There it is. The martyr moment. I'm asking for help, that's it." "You make 6 figures, Daisy. You don't need help. You just don't want us here anymore." The silence between us lasted longer than it should have. Long enough for Lois to walk in from the hallway, holding a laundry basket. "What's going on?" she asked. Shauna didn't miss a beat. "Daisy wants us to start paying rent." I opened my mouth to correct her, but Lois cut me off. "Honey," she said, turning to me, "I'm sure you're overwhelmed, but this feels extreme. They're just getting back on their feet." I stared at her, trying to read her face. Was she serious? "I've been covering every bill for 3 months. I didn't even ask for back pay. I just asked if we could split going forward." Lois placed the basket on a chair. "You have more than enough. You're single, no kids, and I don't see you struggling to eat." It hit me harder than I expected, like a slap without sound. "That's what this is about?" I asked. "Because I don't have a husband or children. I'm supposed to carry everyone else." "No one said that," Lois replied, eyes softening just enough to seem reasonable. "But when you've been given more, it's kind to give more." The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in a cup on the counter. I looked at Shauna. She had that smug calm she always wore when someone else did the dirty work for her. "Okay," I said. "Thanks for clearing that up." I gathered the bills and returned them to the manila folder. "Where are you going?" Lois asked as I walked past. "To my room," I said. "You're being dramatic." I didn't answer, just climbed the stairs and closed the door behind me. I didn't lock it this time, not out of trust. I just didn't have the energy. Instead, I opened my laptop again and pulled up my budgeting spreadsheet. I scrolled backward through each month. Rent, gas, internet, water, electricity, trash, all under my name, all withdrawn from my account, all done without complaint. I started highlighting line items. I added a column labeled Shared Costs, then another, Requested Contribution, No one had asked me to. No one was going to. But from that moment on, I started tracking everything, not out of pettiness, not out of spite, but because if I was going to be accused of being selfish, I wanted the numbers to back me up. I spent most of that week moving through the house like a tenant with a lease that was about to expire. I didn't touch anything I didn't need to, didn't speak unless spoken to, and I kept my eyes open more than my mouth. Observation had become survival, and honestly, it was starting to feel like the only power I had left. On Thursday morning, I stepped out onto the back porch with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Ivy and Cullen were in the yard, playing some version of tag that mostly involved yelling and tackling. Shauna was inside, taking a work call in my upstairs office, the one with the better light and Wi-Fi. I hadn't asked her to stop. I already knew how that would go. The more I watched the kids run barefoot through my grass, the clearer it became. This wasn't temporary to them. It wasn't until things get better, or just until the lease starts. They had settled, unpacked not just their suitcases, but their habits, their mess, their version of what home was supposed to be. And I'd let it happen. I sipped what was left of the coffee and went back inside. As I passed the kitchen table, I noticed a pink envelope labeled Important Housing under a stack of art supplies and empty granola bar wrappers. I stared at it for a second before pulling it out. It was addressed to Shauna, from the local housing authority. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. An hour later, back in my room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the county public records site. I searched her name. It didn't take long. Rental agreement, 2-bedroom apartment, approved. Lease start date, 2 months ago. Current status, active. So she had a place. She had an address. She had options. She just didn't want them. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch. This wasn't just convenience. This was choice, and I was the one footing the bill for it. Later that day, I called the electric company to ask a question about my most recent bill. I wasn't trying to stir anything up, just trying to make sense of the numbers. The woman on the other end was polite, efficient. "Looks like your name was taken off the account back in June," she said, scrolling through the file. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. "You're listed as secondary contact now. The primary is Shauna Berkowitz." I didn't say a word, just thanked her, hung up, and sat still. The room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. She'd changed the account, my account, in my house. No one had told me, no one had asked. I opened a new Word document and started writing down every date, every call, every strange detail that hadn't made sense before. I cross-referenced utilities with Amazon orders tied to party planning. I printed everything and highlighted where my name used to be, now replaced. By the time dinner rolled around, I wasn't hungry. I told them I had a deadline and stayed upstairs. Instead, I printed records, screenshotted emails. I labeled folders on my desktop, utility fraud, rental duplication. I saved them to both a hard drive and a cloud folder. That night, while Shauna laughed on the phone and Malcolm reheated leftovers, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a small stack of manila folders. Ivy walked by once and asked what I was doing. "Homework," I said. She giggled and ran off. I waited until everyone had gone to bed before slipping into the hallway and unlocking the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet in the guest room. It had a stiff, metallic slide to it, like something that hadn't been touched in years. I placed the folders in the back behind some tax paperwork and shut it carefully. One file caught my eye on the way in. Legal backups, family use only. Dad had written that on it. Years ago. I hadn't opened that folder in almost a decade. I closed the drawer slowly. I never wanted to use that folder, but they gave me no choice. The next morning, I left the house earlier than usual. I told them I had a site visit across town, though I didn't specify which site or why it was so urgent. No one asked. They rarely did anymore. I stopped at the grocery store on the east side of town, farther than I normally go, but I wanted distance. I needed a pocket of time where no one knew what room I slept in or how I took my coffee. Somewhere I wasn't invisible, but also not obligated. I was reaching for a box of herbal tea when I heard my name. Daisy? I turned to see Beth Holloway, someone I used to work with briefly during a contract job 2 years ago. We'd gotten along well enough to exchange holiday cards for one season and then faded from each other's circles. Hey, I said, trying to make my face match the energy she seemed to expect. I saw Shauna last week, she said with a smile. She told me she finally bought the house. That's amazing. Congrats to her, right? Something in my chest cracked so fast and so sharp that I thought I might have winced. I forced a chuckle. Yeah, big milestone. Beth didn't catch my hesitation. She patted my arm lightly, grabbed her almond milk, and waved goodbye. I stood there for a moment, the tea box still in my hand. On the drive back, I couldn't stop replaying it. Not the words, those were easy to dismiss. It was how confidently Beth said it, as if it were common knowledge, as if it had been true for a while. When I got home, Shauna was on a call in the backyard, pacing in front of the patio furniture I'd purchased last summer. She gestured like she was negotiating something serious, phone tucked under her chin, hand on her hip. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I walked into the house, checked the mail, and saw a flyer from a local furniture shop confirming delivery on order 2442, Berkowitz. My address. My house. I looked at the confirmation date 2 weeks ago. I pulled out my phone and called the store. Hi, yes, I said. I just want to double-check a recent order. I think there may have been a delivery to my address under a different name. The guy on the phone didn't hesitate. Oh yeah, we've been out there twice already. Real nice place. Signed for by... Hold on, Shauna Berkowitz. I hung up without another word. That night, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling emails, when a notification popped up from a credit monitoring app I rarely used. New inquiry. Department store card. My address. Shauna's name. I didn't panic. I opened a new tab, pulled my credit report, and there it was. Pending application, listed under her name, tied to my home. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. So I did neither. I just opened another folder on my desktop. This one I labeled Identity Compromise. I printed the inquiry. Then I printed the delivery receipts. I copied every page of the county property site showing my legal ownership. Then I stapled them together, one by one. I moved to the dining room where the printer was louder but faster. I worked in silence, only pausing to refill paper or plug in my charger. By the time I was done, the stack of papers had grown thick, substantial, like a case file. It didn't just prove I lived here, it proved someone was trying to make the world believe I didn't. Shauna came in around 9 p.m. with a glass of wine in one hand and her Bluetooth headset still hanging around her neck. "You've been at that computer all day," she said, glancing at the pile of documents. "What's up?" I didn't respond right away, just looked at her, really looked. Her nails were freshly done. Her sandals were new. Designer, not discount. She looked like someone who'd just moved into a vacation rental and had no intention of leaving. "I'm organizing things," I said finally. She smirked. "You always were the neat one." She went to the fridge and poured herself a second glass, as if the day had been tiring for her. After she went upstairs, I sat at the table a while longer, looking at the file I had built with a growing sense of quiet confidence. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't just family stuff. This was calculated replacement. The next morning, I drove to the office supply store and bought a fireproof file folder. It was too expensive for what it was, but I didn't care. When I got home, I labeled it Proof of Identity, Housing Rights. Then I placed it gently on my desk, pressed my palm flat across its surface, and said aloud, more to myself than anyone else, "Lie to the world all you want, but this folder speaks louder." By the time the sun went down, I'd reread every document in that folder twice. Nothing new had happened. Nothing was said out loud. But the stillness in the house that night, it had a different weight, like something was shifting underneath us, even if no one else noticed it yet. The next morning, I walked past the kitchen on my way to the laundry room. My socks made almost no sound on the hardwood, but somehow, I still stopped short when I heard my name. It was Shauna's voice, coming from the other side of the kitchen island. She wasn't talking to me. She thought I was upstairs. She was laughing. I paused. The Alexa speaker on the counter blinked blue. "Alexa, play that back," I said before I even realized I was speaking. A moment later, her voice returned. Same tone, same smirk I'd seen too many times. "She's too easy," the recording said. "As long as she feels guilty, I can keep us here forever." I stared at the device like it had just confessed to a crime. Alexa blinked again. "Would you like to save this clip?" "Yes," I said. Then I added, "Email to myself." As I stood there, something clicked into place. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just quietly, like putting the final piece of a puzzle into a corner you'd been avoiding. I didn't call Shauna out. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell up the stairs or slam drawers. I just turned around, walked back to my room, sat down, and opened my email. There it was. A voice file. I clicked download. Then I dragged it into the conversation logs, witnessed manipulation folder. I had created the night before, but hadn't filled yet. Until now. Later that evening, after dinner had passed with the usual forced laughter and performative normalcy, I found my mother folding laundry in the garage. She liked the quiet there, said it helped her think. I stood in the doorway for a second before she noticed me. "You're up late," she said without looking up. "I need to talk to you." She paused but didn't stop folding. "I have a recording," I said. Now she looked at me. "From this morning. I wasn't spying. I just happened to hear it." She tilted her head, cautious. "What kind of recording?" I held up my phone and hit play. The voice echoed softly in the garage, bouncing off the unfinished walls. "She's too easy. As long as she feels guilty, I can keep us here forever." When it ended, my mother didn't move. Not a flinch. Not a breath. Finally, she said, "She was probably joking." I raised my eyebrows. "That was your takeaway?" "She's your sister, Daisy. People say things they don't mean." "No," I said. "They say things they don't mean when they're angry. That wasn't anger. That was strategy." Mom sighed, her arms crossing loosely over her chest. "You can't kick her out," she said. "I'm not kicking her out. I'm reclaiming my home. She has nowhere else to go. She has an apartment. I found the lease myself. She's not ready. And I wasn't ready to be erased from my own life, but here we are." There was silence. "She's your sister." "You've said that." "And I'm your mother." "I know that too." Her voice cracked a little then. "If you go through with this, you'll destroy this family." I didn't blink. "If I don't, there won't be anything left of me." She stared at me long enough to realize I meant it, that I wasn't bluffing, that I hadn't come out here for permission or to be talked out of it. I had come out here to let her know I was done being complicit. I walked back into the house slowly. There were dishes in the sink that didn't belong to me, a jacket hanging on the back of the couch that I hadn't worn in months. Shauna's perfume still hung in the hallway, like her presence had started to sink into the drywall. I went to my room, shut the door behind me, and locked it, not out of fear, but finality. At my desk, I opened the folder labeled Legal Backups, Family Use Only. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were a few old documents Dad had filed when Mom got sick, and some forms I recognized from the estate lawyer who helped us with the house. I slipped the new documents inside. Everything I'd printed, every email I'd saved, and now the audio file, burned onto a USB drive I labeled by hand. I placed it in the center of the folder, then slid the entire thing back into the cabinet, right beside the folder labeled Proof of Identity, Housing Rights. 2 folders, 2 truths, and one plan I wasn't going to explain. By late afternoon, I had reorganized every document in that cabinet. It wasn't about being meticulous. It was about clarity. When everything's fuzzy, you make emotional decisions. When it's in black and white, you can finally act. I went looking for my birth certificate. I couldn't remember if I'd kept it in the main file drawer or slipped it into the fireproof envelope with my passport. The goal was simple. I wanted every essential document within reach. Organized, labeled, ready. But I didn't find my birth certificate that day. I found something else instead. A thin manila envelope, unmarked except for a sticky note, folded in half and barely clinging to the surface. It said, in my mother's handwriting, "Updated, final." Inside was a revised copy of the will. I immediately recognized the formatting. It came from the same estate attorney we'd used when Dad passed. I'd looked over the original years ago, when we first got the deed in our names. Back then, it was simple. Split evenly between Shauna and me. A 50-50 split of the property, the small life insurance payout, and Mom's medical account. This version, Shauna was listed as sole beneficiary. My name wasn't anywhere on the document. I checked the signature date, 7 months ago. It was notarized, stamped, sealed. I sat there with it in my hands, not angry, not surprised. Just confirmed. She really had done it. No discussion, no explanation. Just removed me from our family's legal history like I'd never existed. And no one said a word. I folded the document neatly, slipped it back into the envelope, and tucked it behind my own records for safekeeping. Not to hide it, just to remind myself that no one else was going to fight for my place in this house, so I'd better learn to. A few hours later, I went upstairs to grab an old donation box from my closet, some clothes I'd meant to take to Goodwill for months, but kept forgetting. While clearing space, I noticed a shoebox on the top shelf, partly hidden behind a suitcase. It was covered in dust. The lid sagged on one side, like someone had once tried to seal it, but gave up halfway. I pulled it down carefully and opened it. There were a few faded photos, a receipt for my first car, a broken keychain, and at the very bottom, an envelope. It had my name written on the front in Dad's handwriting. I sat down on the floor and stared at it for longer than I'd admit to anyone. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years. Just that alone brought something up in me I didn't have a name for. I opened it. Inside was a single page. "Daisy, I don't know when you'll find this, or if you ever will. But just in case, I wanted to say this where no one else could interrupt or spin it around. You were always the one who held this family together, not because you had to, but because you chose to. I've seen you put your needs last more times than I can count. I've watched you make quiet sacrifices, never asking for recognition. But don't let them take that and turn it into a reason to forget you. You're not invisible, kiddo, and you're not replaceable. If one day you feel like you don't belong here anymore, it's not because you're wrong. It's because you finally saw them clearly. When that day comes, don't fight for a seat at the table. Build your own table. Love, Dad." I didn't cry. I thought I might, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. I stood up, folded the letter, and placed it gently in the same folder as the revised will. The contrast between them couldn't have been louder. One tried to erase me. The other made sure I'd never forget who I was. That night, I didn't make dinner. I didn't talk to anyone. I just opened my laptop, opened a blank document, and typed the subject line, "Notice to vacate, effective immediately." I added their full names, the address, the 30-day deadline. Then, I attached scanned copies of my deed, utility records, and ownership documents. I formatted everything professionally, no threats, no emotion, just law. I hit print. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like something belonged to me again. After I hit print, I didn't move right away. I just watched the paper slide out of the tray, inch by inch, like it was building something I couldn't unmake. The legal letter was short, plain, and final. 30 days to vacate. My name on every line that mattered. I let it cool on the desk for a few minutes, before slipping it into the envelope with the rest of the documents. I sealed it without ceremony, taped the back shut, and leaned it against the lamp base where I'd see it first thing in the morning. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anxiety, at least not the kind that coils in your chest. It was something quieter, like my body was already preparing for the separation, refusing rest as if sleep might undo the decision. I lay in bed listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the occasional creak of footsteps overhead. At one point, I heard someone open the back door and let it slam, then the distant sound of Shauna laughing on a call. I didn't even flinch. By dawn, the sky behind the blinds had softened into blue. I got up, dressed in jeans and a gray long-sleeve shirt, and packed only what I needed: laptop, chargers, folders, a pair of sneakers, 2 sets of clothes, my father's letter. No drawers were emptied, no closets were touched. I wanted it to look like I could walk back in at any moment, but never would. In the kitchen, Shauna was making toast. She didn't turn when I entered. "You're up early," she said over her shoulder. I stood quietly for a moment, then asked, "Do you have a minute?" She turned, chewing, arms crossed. "I'm asking for the last time," I said. "Can we figure out a plan? A real one. One where we both know where the boundaries are." She blinked slowly, then tilted her head and gave me that look, the one she always used when she was pretending to be patient. "Daisy," she said, "if you don't like it here, leave. No one's forcing you to stay." That was it. No drama, no build-up, just the line that tipped the final domino. I nodded once and turned away, hearing her mutter something under her breath about how I always made things harder than they had to be. I didn't pack anything more. I didn't slam a single door. I just walked to the entryway, picked up the overnight bag, and slipped out before anyone else woke up. In the driveway, I sat in my car for a minute. Then I pulled out my phone and booked a hotel 5 miles away. I wasn't leaving town. I was making room. At 2:14 a.m., from a clean motel room with beige walls and 2 lamps that buzzed faintly, I composed the email. Subject: effective immediately. Your access is revoked attachments. Notice to vacate. Property deed. Certified copy. Audio file. Alexa playback, March 19th, 7:43 a.m. Message body. This message serves as formal notification that your continued residence at my address is no longer permitted. You have 30 calendar days to vacate the premises. Please direct any responses to my legal representative. Further communication outside of legal channels will be archived and disregarded. I hit send. I turned off my notifications. Then I turned off my phone. The following morning, around 7:02, I turned it back on. It didn't even finish booting before the first call came through. Shauna, then Mom, then Shauna again, then Malcolm, then a flood of numbers I didn't recognize. I had 40 missed calls, 19 voicemails, 30-something unread texts before breakfast. One voicemail was just my mother saying, "What have you done?" followed by silence. Another was Shauna screaming, "You think this makes you righteous? You think you're better than us?" I didn't listen to the rest. I placed the phone face down on the table and finished the orange juice I'd ordered from room service. That silence in the room? It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was mine. At exactly noon, the last message went out, pre-scheduled so I wouldn't hesitate. 3 words. No greeting, no explanation. Don't call me again. I checked out of the hotel just after 1. I took the back roads home. Not because I was afraid to be seen, but because I wanted the quiet. The long stretches of open fields, the broken-down barns along the county line, the space between decisions and outcomes. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, watching the windows of my own house like it belonged to someone else now. But it didn't. It belonged to me. They finally heard me, because I stopped speaking. I stayed in the car longer than I needed to. The engine had gone cold. My bag sat untouched in the passenger seat. From where I was parked, I could see the front windows, curtains still drawn. The porch light had burned out sometime last week. A small trail of dead leaves gathered against the front step. no movement inside. I finally opened the door, stepped out, and walked slowly up the sidewalk. No one opened the door before I got there. No voices from inside. No sound of laughter, dishes clinking, or a TV turned up too loud. I unlocked the door. The silence hit first. It wasn't hollow. It was complete. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The smell was different now. No more cooking oil or cheap perfume. Just air. Still heavy with what had been left behind. But mine. Room by room, I walked through. The couch was bare. No more throw pillows in patterns I didn't pick. No gaming controllers. No blankets left crumpled on the floor. I walked into the hallway and paused by the closet. A pair of my shoes had somehow been kicked aside, covered in dust bunnies. I picked them up and placed them on the rack, neatly. The dining table had a ring on the wood from where someone had left a sweating glass too long. I touched it. No resentment, just noticing. Upstairs, the bigger guest room, once Shauna's room, was empty. The bed stripped, walls blank. It smelled like furniture polish and a little bit of citrus. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just breathed. That night, I changed the locks. Not because I was afraid of them coming back, but because I needed the symbolism. I needed the click of a new key to match the shift inside me. I filled the fridge with food I actually liked. Leftover enchiladas, fresh coffee beans, oat milk, the good kind of yogurt. I threw out 3 half-used jars of jam that had been sitting there since June. And then I did something I'd been meaning to do for years. I took the letter from my father, the one I'd kept on my desk, and framed it. Simple black frame, no glass, just enough to keep it safe. I hung it beside the kitchen doorway, right where I used to hang the chore chart when I still believed fairness was enough. No one would read it but me. But I would read it often. Later that week, after 3 days of no calls, no knocks on the door, no accidental run-ins at the store, I got one last voicemail. I recognized my mother's voice before she even said a word. "This family was fine," she said, "until you started thinking for yourself." That was it. No apology, no explanation, no softness. I pressed delete before it finished. That sentence could have ruined me once. It could have made me second-guess every line I'd drawn. But not now. Not after everything I'd reclaimed. Quietly. Intentionally. I stepped out onto the back porch with a glass of water and sat down. There was no music playing, no kids screaming, no one on speakerphone pacing back and forth. Just a breeze moving through the grass. I leaned back in the chair and watched the sunlight shift across the backyard. I thought choosing myself meant betrayal, I said aloud. But the truth is, they betrayed me long before I said a word. I looked toward the upstairs window. "I'm not heartless," I added. "I'm healed." I didn't need a dramatic finale. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't even need them to feel sorry. I just needed to be done. Later that night, I sat at my desk and wrote a small note to myself on a plain note card. "This house loves you back now." I folded it and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. No signature, no date, just a promise. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. No noise, no footsteps, no tension waiting for morning. Only quiet. And it was mine. They didn't say goodbye, but I did.